Hello and welcome to World Insight on CGTN, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. We start today's program with China-EU relations. Chinese President Xi Jinping co-hosted via video link a Monday meeting with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, whose country currently hosts the EU's rotating presidency. Also in the meeting are European Council President Michel and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. President Xi said China and the EU could work together under four principles: peaceful coexistence, openness and cooperation, multilateralism, as well as dialogue and consultation. They sought to speed up investment agreement talks with an eye on wrapping up negotiations, hopefully within this year. Both cooperation and frictions have effects on the ties between China and the EU, two of the world's biggest trading partners. In face of a COVID-19 pandemic, both sides are looking to strengthen coordination. For more on the China-EU virtual summit, we are joined by a very strong panel in Brussels. Fraser Cameron, a senior advisor at the European Policy Center in Brussels. In Beijing, Adam Dennett, Secretary General of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. Also joining us in Beijing via Skype, Wang Yiwei, Jean Monnet Chair Professor, Director of the Center for European Studies from Renmin University of China. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. A lot of information to digest at this moment. We know that there might be also some press conferences given by parties participating earlier in the virtual summit. So let's go into some of the discussion on the key issue. Mr. Cameron, given the latest information and press release, what do you make of the summit so far?
Well, the three key issues are cooperation on the pandemic, moving forward on the investment treaty negotiations, as you said, hopefully by the end of the year, and climate change. These are the three big issues, and the indications are that both sides do want to make progress on this, but we haven't actually seen the final outcome. There won't be a joint communique, but both sides are going to give a press conference in the next half hour or so. But I think both sides before the summit let on that this was rather important, not a breakthrough summit, but a summit whereby both sides would indicate they do want to make a deal.
Right. They do want to make a deal, and we see the deal or deals have been ranging from what Mr. Cameron just put it, two multilateral issues. One is climate change, certainly that's multilateral issues, and pandemic, of course, prevention control, also multilateral. And also, meanwhile, there's a bilateral investment treaty that is under discussion. Professor Wang from China, what do you make of the result so far?
I think it's where China-EU relations in a crucial time, because the United States enforced the European Union to take sides, so-called decouple and the so-called new Cold War. So whether the world will be make progress or return to the Cold War scenario, I think the European Union's strategic decision makings are very highlighted in the Chinese agenda. And the China-EU as two civilizations now have a new definition for multilateralism and to make progress for the globalization. It's not just Asian civilization, it's Asian modern civilization. I think that's President Xi reiterated.
Okay.
So China and the EU need each other. China and the EU should work together to make that work, to get the green recovery and also to deal with the pandemic. That's, I think, very important signals.
How to make, Mr. Dennett, independent strategic decisions for the EU at a time of great crossroad, put it in the word by the Chinese president, and also be able to work for its own benefits and on a multilateral agenda for the world. That probably is a test for the EU, for the business world too, right, Mr. Dennett?
Sure. I mean, the EU is making its own independent decisions, and probably the best example of that is its engagement with China on both the CAI, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, or the BIT that you referred to, and the geographical indicators. I mean, on both these issues, we've seen significant developments this year. The signing of the geographical indicators today shows that the EU and China can work together.
working together is extremely important. It's not only just about the content, but also about the spirit, given the fact that we are having a very divided world these days. Mr. Cameron, earlier there were trips made by top U.S. officials to some of the European capitals, which has been categorized by most of the European media as quote-unquote anti-China trip. So, Mr. Cameron, to what extent do you think the European capitals and Brussels together be able to once again make that what they call independent strategic decisions?
Well, I think the EU has no interest in joining a potential second Cold War fronted by the United States and China. I mean, the EU Foreign Policy Chief Borrell made it quite clear this week that he wants to follow the Sinatra doctrine. The EU will do it my way, i.e. they will do it on their own terms. So that's quite clear. But certainly trust has been eroded over the summer because of the events in Hong Kong and Xinjiang, and therefore there's certainly, I would say, a toughening of the overall EU approach towards China, and that's why it's really important to move on and get further agreements along the lines of what was done today in geographical indicators, because the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and if we can get results, I think that will help change opinion.
China and the EU, Mr. Dennett, if I could be frank here, have always have some differences regarding, human rights issue, political systems, ideological issue, and both sides recognize that. But the issue is not about these differences, but rather attitudes to work on differences. That's probably even more important. Diversity is the issue we are facing today. Any partners in any relationship have differences in certain areas. So, Mr. Dennett, how will this have an impact, the spirit of being able to work together on the BIT, which we talked about intensely regarding the business community, and the CAI, given your insider's information, quote unquote?
Well, as your question, I think, demonstrated it well in that it's a very complex relationship. So there are areas where we are working well together on the geographical indicators. That's a success. I think this morning also there was an agreement to create a new mechanism on energy exchanges at a vice premier level, a climate change dialogue. So that's good. But the CAI, as Mr. Cameron said, the proof is in the eating, so to speak. That has been going on for 7 years now. There's been 30 rounds. We're hopeful that something could be agreed upon by the end of this year, but it's tough. We've got a long way to come, and quite frankly, there are differences of opinion, as you say, in terms of our systems and the level of openness that we see here in China. So we hope that this buzzword of reciprocity can be implemented within this agreement, particularly in the area of financial services, where we still have companies here in China that aren't able to operate at the same level or with the same openness that Chinese companies can operate in Europe.
And therefore, it gives the word reciprocity, which has been raised by certain politicians in the EU, an interesting one, isn't it, Professor Wang? Because we have seen, as a result of geopolitics regarding the trans-Pacific relationship, investment from China into the European continent have been facing some challenges, not to mention in the technical world, such as that concerning Huawei and some of the others. So, Professor Wang, from China's perspective, how to see reciprocity?
Well, firstly, European Union not identify China as a developing country. Even identify China as a superpower. It's a competitor, not just a partner. So it doesn't mean reciprocity. What the European Union opened the market to China, and China should do at the same level, even further. So that's in Chinese understanding. Maybe it's unfair because we are a developing country in a different stage of development. And the second meaning, I think, that from the European Union side, actually it's difficult to have the real reciprocity principles with China or the United States, because the European Union is not a single country, it's not a sovereign state. Even though European Union now pursues so-called the European sovereignty, strategic autonomy, and digital sovereignty, it's not a state, it's not a single state. And China and the United States is a state, and China is even a civilization state. And thirdly, I think the European Union strategic independence from United States, from China, is still a long way to go. Given that the European Union security strategy is not quite independent. There are many alliances of the United States, the NATO, the security, and most importantly, they don't have independent search engine like Google.
Okay.
And also, they don't have the industrial power policies independently. So it's hard for European Union to be really independent and strategic autonomy.
Mr. Cameron, is that an aspiration rather than a reality?
Well, it's always been an aspiration. I mean, Professor Wong is right in terms of the EU being 27 member states with different histories, traditions, etc. But as regards China, I think they've been remarkably united in the past couple of years. Obviously, some countries like Germany have a far more intense economic relationship with China than others. But the policy that was agreed last year, which recognized the EU-China relationship as being complicated. On the one hand, we are partners in many areas. We're also competitors in some areas. And, of course, the criteria that upset some Chinese was systemic rival. That was related to global governance issues, different perceptions, for example, of multilateralism. So it is a complicated relationship. The EU is, I think, more united than it has been before. But we have to go ahead and get results. We can't ignore one of us or the other. We are two of the most important powers in the world.
That's a great point I should take. Also to bring it to you, Mr. Dennett, that the differences does not mean we just sit by and look at these differences and say, what can we do about it? But rather to recognize it and work with a spirit that can-do spirit, as they say, interestingly, in American culture. Mr. Dennett, about the business area, which I want to pursue more details with you, how much do you think there is really there in terms of a concrete common ground regarding multilateralism, regarding rules, regarding how the economy might function, especially with the threat of the pandemic, and regarding how technological world can still advance despite of a geopolitical fight between China and the United States. Mr. Dennett, from the European perspective, how do you see all of this?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there, but let me go back to business.
Sure.
Business wants to do business. A lot of European companies have invested in China.
Exactly. Business wants to do business. Go ahead, sir.
And Chinese companies want to go abroad in certain circumstances. Perhaps we can, and we can work well together in doing so. But one of the biggest issues we're facing this year is the politicization of business, and that's really unfortunate. What we're all looking for is stability, predictability, and transparency. And again, I go back to the CAI because those are some of the key objectives in this. And if governments can deliver to business an opportunity for them to do better business together, they'll do that. We're supportive of both governments in coming up with a robust deal. But what we don't want is a political deal which is just for a signing. We want it to be real, and we want it to be meaningful, and we want to be able to demonstrate to the rest of the world, like we've done with Japan, like we've done with Canada, like we've done with Singapore, that we can sign a significant bilateral trade or investment agreement and that businesses and people can benefit from it.
Great point. Professor Wang, also about that, it should not be just a political deal. It should be a real business deal, BIT or CII. And same to the other agreements that might be reached between China and the EU or European countries. It should not just be a political deal. It should be much more than that, much richer than that.
Firstly, of course, it should be the economic deal because they have their own logic, cannot be higher external force. However, politicalized is unavoidable because politics and economy always combine together. It's not just the European politics. Populism rising in Europe, nationalism also rising in Europe, protectionism also rising in Europe. At the same time, I think political issues now be related to the United States. Everybody, even not mentioned, but the United States is elephant in the room because of the real summit postponed to wait for not just the BIT negotiation result, but also wait for the result of the American president's election. Particularly for the Europeans eager to wait Biden to be next American president to pay more attention to Europe. So the United States even watch very closely to the negotiation progress. So any promise that China gave to the European Union, United States will add more. It's like a WTO entrance negotiation. So which makes China very difficult to reform our state-owned enterprises, substitutes all sustainable development and even labor rights. So that's they make this more complex.
It is a complex time. It is also an issue of timing. So many different kinds of timing. There are European political agenda and the calendar, American cross-Atlantic agenda, cross-Pacific agenda, China's own economic and political agenda and calendar. So, Mr. Cameron, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about just before the storms or before the big results, some temporary discussion between China and the EU, or do you think from the EU side also we are looking for some real, long-term, sustainable kinds of agreement and consensus?
Well, everyone in Europe wants a long-term, stable relationship with China. I mean, the immediate neighborhood of the EU is not encouraging at the moment. If you look at what's happening in Belarus or the Eastern Mediterranean, Borrell described it the other day as on flames. So we want some stability in the world. We're not getting it from the United States at the moment, and it remains to be seen if Biden will win. I think Professor Wong's right. 90% of Europeans probably do want Biden to win and try and come back to some kind of semblance of global rules. But the world has changed, and it is important that the United States, China, and the European Union have a kind of equilibrium, because they are the three biggest trading powers in the world. And we have to work not only bilaterally, but through the WTO as well. We have to get back to a properly functioning multilateral trade system. And that's also under discussion today, and I think it's important that the EU and China move forward together on this.
One of the things that all sides have been talking about, including at the UN Security Council, when we see a general actually assembly, when we see a vote over the weekend on COVID-19, two opposition votes coming from the United States and Israel. However, the rest of the international community do come on a consensus regarding prevention, control, and some of the other issues such as vaccine. So to a certain extent, Mr. Cameron, if I could just briefly follow up, despite of challenges to multilateralism, we see the world has been gradually waking up, at least on some of the urgent matters. What message do you think these kind of multilateral consensus could send to China EU's capitals for the two to consider and to work on?
Well, politicians like to use the word rules-based international system, but often they don't really define the terms. We can all make speeches saying how we're all wedded to multilateralism. We actually have institutions, including the UN, the WTO,
yes,
and they've not been functioning as well as they should be. So I think it's important to not talk about new institutions, but saying, well, why? What's wrong with them? Why are the big powers not putting the weight behind them to make sure they work? And that's why it's important to have this dialogue. We know what the position of the Trump administration is, but that may change after November. So let's be prepared for that, and let's hope that the EU and China can also reduce the number of differences they have on some of these big international issues.
Mr. Wang, Professor, recently I had a talk with a former Assistant Secretary of State of the U.S., and he was talking about, in his personal view, two layers of issues the U.S. has with China in terms of technology and science advancement. One is China has become such a competitor and even rival in some of the key areas. The other is China has been so much strongly participating in coming up with the latest rules because technologies are changing fast, while the U.S. has been practicing mainly withdrawing from international platforms. So, of course, the two trends, China cannot prevent it. It's just a natural process of development, given what the U.S. position, particularly these days. So, Professor Wang, under these circumstances, how much can you see in terms of China and the European capitals, including with the EU, be able to work on both on the international rules and then also on technological collaboration on the grassroots real results?
I think there are three basic differences between the European Union and the United States, particularly for the technology. Firstly, the European Union's transfer of technology to China is more than the U.S., Japan, and any other partners combined together. So because the U.S. is a very religious country, they want to dominate to control this kind of technology. Because since the industrialization, so all the industrialization 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, they all be Western powers, and then now be the U.S. alliance, and more rely on the United States. And then the industrialization 4.0, and then the 5G is the core, and China, Huawei, take the leading role, which is not U.S. alliance, not the Western country, and Americans want to dominate, so they'll be challenged by China, by the new technology. So now the European Union different with the United States. So the European Union not want to dominate. They want to set the rules, but not they occupy and dominate. Secondly, United States as number one, they were hegemonic power. They think about China as a competitor and a challenger. They even from ideology, they cannot accept that is that the socialist country like China can take advance in the innovation of the technology, even as Eastern civilization. So that's the European Union, either the different with the United States. And thirdly, the United States have a strong military alliance. They're challenged by the Huawei and by the new technology. So that's European Union also different. So that's the reason we still pay high attention to the cooperation with the European Union on the technology transfer and the technology innovation.
We are really running out of time, but Mr. Dennett, I want to give you a 30 seconds, if you can, to also respond to that.
Each and every individual member state in the EU will make its own decision. What Mr. Wong was saying, I think as well, is there's issues here in China where European companies are concerned about the access that they're getting here. So there's a combination of political issues, of sovereign issues here, and security issues at play. So this is obviously going to be a very hot topic for time to come, and I think on the agenda of today's discussion as well, probably.
Adam Dennett, Fraser Cameron, Wang Yiwei, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the latest development on the China-EU Leaders Summit. Really appreciate it. We're looking forward to new information and new insights coming in. All the best for all of you. Thank you.